This is our 10th year of operation, and I have yet to testify before a bill which I believe is as poorly thought out as I believe this one to be.
Oh, this could get good. Today, Bob Duchense's Wild Maine is going to the State House. Specifically, we're going to tear back the curtain to see how laws are made, or, as in the majority of cases, how suggested laws are killed. And we're going to do it in the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. What you are about to hear took place on Tuesday, February 24th. That's because when I looked at the legislative calendar, I noticed 3 unusual bills scheduled for hearings that day. One would study moose and winter ticks. One would allow hunters to wear hunter safety pink. And one would legalize hunting small game with slingshots. Many citizens might say, what? The deeper story is actually how Maine is different than other states. How every bill, no matter how weird it might seem by the title, actually has a backstory and somebody who cares about it. Even whoopie pies. Bob Duchense's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dice Arts, EBS, Doors Equipment, and Napa Auto Parts. Every state is different. Every state makes its laws differently. Full disclosure, I am in the Maine House of Representatives thanks to my neighbors in Alton, Argyll, Corinth, Hudson, and Milford. Maine is often accused of having a legislature that is too big. Well, here's the trade-off. The more legislators you have, the fewer people each one represents, the closer you get to your representative government. In other states, you may have a hard time reaching your representative. In Maine, you can just walk across the street or make a local call. You can chat at church or in Hannaford's. The extra representation doesn't cost that much because, frankly, you're not paying them that much. It's a part-time citizen legislature. Also, Maine has 2 branches of the legislature, but saves time and money by having joint committees so that representatives and senators serve together on the same committee and bills are only heard once. And there's not a lot of confusion between the 2 branches. That saves a lot of time and money. Some states have professional legislators who earn some good money. They have staff. I have staff. I have 1 aide that I share with 11 other representatives. I have no office, just a desk. It's about the size of the one I had in 5th grade. The point is, the Maine legislature is just a bunch of neighbors like yourself that you sent down to do the job. Part-time, they come home and get a real job. That's Maine. So we start the show with LD 242, an act to allow hunters to wear hunter safety pink in October in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. We're in the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. Senator Paul Davis of Sangerville is the Senate chair. The House chair is Mike Shaw of Standish, who is running the hearing. The bill sponsor is conservative Republican from Sherman and an all-around nice guy, Ricky Long.
Good afternoon. I'm Rick Long. I'm from southern Aroostook County, and I'm here today to present LD 242, an act to allow hunters to wear hunter pink instead of hunter's orange in October, in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This bill would give the hunters in the state of Maine the opportunity to wear pink as an alternative to the traditional hunting orange, only in the month of October. This bill was submitted per request by a constituent of mine.
There it is, right there. How Maine is different. Any citizen can request help getting a bill considered. In the first year of each 2-year period, legislators can submit any bill they want and nobody can stop it. A lot of people think there are too many frivolous bills and too much time wasted. Well, maybe. But it also means you don't have just a few powerful politicians in leadership at the top making all the decisions about what gets considered. And it means that anybody can bring an idea to their representative and get some respect. That's the trade-off. Maine's democracy is very close to the people, for better or worse. And frankly, it doesn't waste that much time. This bill took maybe 10 minutes to hear. Despite what shows up in the paper, it's not nearly as partisan as the headlines make it seem either. So, take it away, Ricky.
As you know, the color pink is the signature color for breast cancer awareness and was first established by the Susan G. Komen Foundation in 1991. Breast cancer is the most common cancer among women in America and is the 2nd leading cause of cancer deaths in women. Pink, being a vibrant color, is a safe alternative to a hunter's orange. Much like hunter's orange, the color pink can be seen from great distance, which is important when dealing with firearms in the woods. I ask for your support for LD 242 and encourage you to allow this simple change to take effect. Thank you for your dedication and service to Maine, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much.
Plain and simple. I'm happy to ask any questions if I can.
Is there any questions? from the committee. Senator Searway.
Do you know if they do this in any other state?
There's no other states currently doing this at this time. Some of the concerns is you're going to hear about will be how bright it is, what the reflective qualities of the pink is, or whatnot. That, I believe, would be determined by law. If this committee adopts that, it's something that will have to be adopted. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
thank you.
Are there any other co-sponsors or legislators that would like to testify on the bill? Seeing none, testimony in favor of the bill. Is there anybody that would like to testify in favor of the bill? Seeing none, is there anybody that would like to testify in opposition to the bill? Opposed?
Good afternoon, Representative Shaw and members of the Fish and Wildlife Committee. I'm Michael Sawyer, Supervisor of the Recreational Safety Unit at the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, speaking on behalf of the Department in opposition to LD 242.
And here it comes. There is no better way to find out what's wrong with an idea than to put it in a bill. Lots of ideas sound good, and then the experts show up. In a moment, we'll get back to hunter safety pink. We'll hear if legalizing hunting with slingshots is a good idea, and we'll hear a bill to require IFW to step up its efforts to study whether winter ticks are killing off all the moose. This is Bob Duchense's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchense's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. We're in the State House today, listening to three unusual bills in front of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. The legislature often gets blamed for wasting time on frivolous bills, and there's plenty of justification for that accusation. However, that's about the only way Maine's legislative branch of government can talk about something. Every bill is a conversation that otherwise couldn't happen. It's not like senators sit around and discuss, what are we going to enact today? Bills are organized conversations around specific ideas. Most die, and some of them die rather quickly. In fact, you can learn a lot from a dead bill and improve an idea for another time. In the first part of today's show, Representative Ricky Long from Sherman brought an idea from a constituent to allow hunters to wear pink instead of orange during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Now we're hearing from Michael Sawyer, the safety guy at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
Maine enjoys a very safe record in regards to hunting overall, and specifically during our open firearm season on deer. Hunter orange, or fluorescent orange, has been mandatory for deer hunters to wear since 1973 in this state, and has contributed significantly to the decline of two-party incidents over this period. During the month of October, we typically have Youth Deer Hunting Day and may have Opening Day for firearm season. Both days typically have a high volume of participation by hunters. These hunters and non-hunters have become accustomed to seeing hunter orange on hunters afield, and are also accustomed to wearing it while hunting. To our knowledge, there is no common definition or standard for hunter pink, which can clearly be measured for law enforcement purposes or for consistency among hunters who would be required to wear it. In the past 6 years, we have had a total of 39 hunting-related incidents, with an average of 6.5 per year. This figure takes into account all seasons and for all species that we hunt. Two-party hunting incidents during deer season are very low, and we feel the use of 2 articles of hunter orange is a major reason for this. I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. I will remind the general public that we do have a $5 coffee fund for anyone whose cell phones that happen to go off. So if you have a cell phone on you, I do ask that you either turn it off or put it on silent mode. Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Wood.
Thank you, Representative Shaw. So if we clarified that you could not use hunter pink on Youth Day for deer, or say deer season opened up in October instead of in November, that we clarified that it would be for strictly non-deer hunting season, would you feel differently about the bill?
Well, I guess I'll give you a little interesting history to this bill. The young lady that put this proposal forth actually contacted me last fall after being on a moose hunt and discussed the requirements of hunter orange and how that came to be. She was not aware of the legislative process or anything at that time. So we did discuss other alternatives for the month of October, and she was not being aware of the legislative process. I actually referred her to Representative Long because he is from the area where she resides. So I think, we would have to discuss in the department what our feelings were, but the opportunity to discuss other alternatives is there.
So if they still continued with the Hunter Orange, what they use now, what would be the harm in maybe having an added pink item?
That's certainly an option. I mean, if we stuck with either the two article requirement during deer season or the one article moose season, certainly any promotion of pink in addition to those would be an idea that we'd be open to.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, yes. Representative Light.
Thank you, Representative Shaw. Mr. Sawyer, in your testimony, you mentioned hunted relating incidents. Mm-hmm. Can you describe that for me and tell me exactly what that means?
Be more than glad to. So across the country, all states and probably provinces track hunter-related incidents. They will not necessarily be equal in all states, etc. Here in the state of Maine, we look at a hunting incident as anything where a individual hunting, a non-hunter, or another hunting party is involved in a situation where they receive medical attention or there was a death as a result of the use of a firearm, archery equipment, or a crossbow. So it would require medical attention and or something of a severe nature that we would record.
Okay, thank you.
If somebody were to add a pink color into their attire over the hunt, like say, just for instance, you had your hunter orange jacket on and you put a armband or something over that's acceptable now, I take it, under current law?
You certainly can have any other colors in addition to the requirements for hunter orange, which when we're in the two article seasons require a cap with hunter orange or a garment that covers the torso and visible from all directions. And we should add, especially maybe for new members, you are allowed to use camo orange in this state, which has to have a minimum of 50% orange on that vest or jacket. So you certainly could have pink in addition to any color, actually, in addition to the required amount of hunter orange.
Okay, thank you.
So there it is. An idea brought to the legislature from a private citizen through her elected representative, some expert opinion about what's wrong with the idea, and then some suggestions for how to achieve the objective through reasonable alternatives that don't require a law or taxpayer expense. And by my watch, it took about 11 minutes. How about the idea of hunting with slingshots? Once again, Representative Mike Shaw of Standish is chairing the hearings today.
Moving right along, we will open the public hearing for LD 291, an act to allow the hunting of small game animals with slingshots, presented by Senator Cushing of Penobscot.
I am Senator Andre Cushing. I represent 15 communities in southern Penobscot County. I'm submitting this bill on behalf of a constituent who had spoken with the department. He works U.S. Wildlife and felt that there were other states that he had come to the knowledge of that provided this opportunity, and while I recognize that there are a number of issues that probably will be raised by the department in concern for the implementation of something of this nature, I think as we recognize that there are perhaps some things that were overlooked in time, it's healthy to have opportunities like this to debate whether hunting and outdoor activities may benefit from further investigation. So I would be happy to either answer questions from members of the committee now or return for the work session after you've had a chance to digest this more fully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative.
That's Senator Andre Cushing from Hamden offering an idea to allow hunting with slingshots. He just mentioned work session. That's a distinct part of the legislative process in Maine. Public hearings are for you. It's when legislators are supposed to sit there and listen to what you have to say and maybe ask some questions and otherwise shut up. Then, perhaps after gathering up more information from experts on the bill, the committee meets again later to work the bill. That is, they discuss it in depth, suggest amendments, and decide what to do with it. Eventually, the committee votes, and the bill goes to the full legislature for consideration. If the amended version is supported unanimously in committee, the bill will pass the full legislature without debate. If the entire committee votes it down, the full legislature won't even look at it. Dead as a doornail. When Bob Duchense's Wild Maine continues in a moment, you can bet there will be some questions asked about slingshots. I mean, hunting with slingshots. What could possibly go wrong?
The department is concerned that the use of slingshots would not be efficient in delivering a clean, lethal shot and would result in the crippling and injuring of many species of wildlife.
This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Bob Duchense's Wild Maine, Saturday mornings at 9, Sunday mornings at 8. On Tuesday, February 24th, the Legislature's Committee on Inland Fisheries and Wildlife heard 3 peculiar bills. One to allow hunter safety pink, one to study moose and winter ticks, which we'll get to, and one we're reviewing right now. Senator Andre Cushing suggested a law to allow hunting small game with slingshots. He's presented the testimony. Now the committee will ask questions. House Chair Representative Mike Shaw opens up the floor.
Are there any questions for the senator? Yes, Senator Sewell.
Senator Cushing, I was wondering how are you very efficient in using a slingshot yourself?
I myself do not participate in this, not that I find anything wrong with the fine art. It goes right up there, I think, in the skill set with falconry and some of the other things that we already allow in this state in the taking of small game.
I know that slingshots, I think, does this get into being registered?
I think that we all recognize the nature of crafting a weapon of this type has perhaps been done with a good sturdy stick and a couple of rubber bands. So there are certainly commercially available slingshots. I'm sure that we could provide some data to you on what is available for purchase either at local sporting goods stores or even online. And I think that there are probably people who use this in other areas in both competitive and hunting situations. I think it would be very difficult to put upon the department the need to specify the type, weight of the missile and other components of this. I'm sure they'll be speaking to it. I've gotten a word that they have representatives here today that will be sharing their concerns about the bill. And I certainly appreciate that because I feel we need to be respectful of the folks who are required to enforce the laws that we make here. And I would ask you to be thoughtful if you pursue this measure about what consequences there are, particularly the unintended ones, because we have a habit of creating some very interesting unintended consequences here. But as far as the issue of licensing or registering, I'm not sure that that's a necessary step. I don't think this is going to take on a nature that, from my brief research, that is going to be of the significance of other weaponry that might be out there. Certainly is, in any case, the use of firearms or crossbows or slingshots or anything of that nature has to be a responsible act because individuals have to take responsibility for what may be affected in the range of fire. They have to be respectful of the fact that if you are hunting, you're going out there to take a life, maybe of an animal, but there may be other consequences, and you've got to have a sense of responsibility that comes from the action that you're participating in.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm very grateful to those who chose not to question me.
Are there co-sponsors here or other legislators that would like to testify on this bill? Seeing none, is there anyone that would like to testify in favor of the bill? In favor. Seeing none, is there anybody that would like to testify in opposition to the bill? Opposition. Yes.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Darrell DeJoy. I'm the Executive Director of the Wildlife Alliance of Maine. We're a nonprofit 501c3 organization that advocates for wildlife and largely non-consumptive recreationalists who live, work, and pay taxes in the state of Maine. This is our 10th year of operation, and I have yet to testify before a bill which I believe is as poorly thought out as I believe this one to be. The ramifications of encouraging the use of slingshots to kill small game animals is unacceptable to the majority of people. As one commenter on our Facebook page asked, "What's next, bathing chipmunks?" We believe that LD 291 will be an enforcement nightmare to an already overburdened warden service. Slingshots are silent, lightweight, and easy to hide. We believe with those difficulties with enforcement that more wildlife will be injured, and not just game animals. As a former wildlife rehabilitator for our state for over 10 years, I can say definitively that we do not need even more injured wildlife than we already have. We also believe that pets have a strong chance of being injured as well. Without proper supervision, kids will often just shoot at things because they want to use their slingshot. Regardless of what supporters might claim, this is the sad fact. Instead of encouraging yet more shooting of wildlife with whatever you can find to do so, why not teach more respect and enjoyment of wildlife for wildlife's sake, and concentrate on improving the use of traditional hunting methods? With wildlife becoming increasingly more difficult to find, why are we trying to encourage more ways to shoot the more common wildlife? While a slingshot can be a very deadly weapon in the right hand, the learning curve from first having, then practicing, then actually hunting with a slingshot is very steep. It's that beginning to that point that we're concerned about. When we consider the added issues of enforcement with a small and silent weapon that will likely injure as many animals as it will kill, there is little to no reason to encourage its use, and we do believe that by passing this bill, it will encourage many, many more people to do this. I'm not saying that people don't do it now in the state, but I do believe that with the encouragement of this law, a lot more would do it, and less skilled people as well. It's important to note that people also injure themselves using slingshots. Even the manufacturers state clearly that people using their product should always wear proper safety glasses. Will this requirement be part of LD 291 as well? And of course, the enforcement of this requirement would add another layer to the likely problem of enforcement. The passage of LD 291 would be a series of accidents waiting to happen, to wildlife, to people, pets, and property. Common sense should prevail here. On behalf of WHAM and its over 1,500 members, I respectfully ask this committee to vote ought not to pass on LD 291.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for Mr. DeJoy? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Further testimony in opposition to the bill.
Good afternoon again. Senator Davis, Representative Shaw, and members of the Inland Fisheries and Wildlife Committee. I'm Judy Camuso. I'm the Wildlife Director for Maine Fish and Wildlife, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Department in opposition to LD 291. This bill would allow the use of a slingshot to hunt certain small game species designated by the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. The department is opposed to this bill for many of the reasons that have already been brought up. Slingshots vary widely in their functionality and their efficacy. There are no clear industry standards for what we would call the draw weight of a slingshot, nor the caliber weight of the projectile, nor the substance of the projectile. A pebble can and often be used as a projectile in a slingshot. In addition, the rubber portion of the slingshot degrades at varying rates, partly depending on how long they have been on the shelf, so ensuring the draw weight of a slingshot is very challenging. The department is concerned that the use of slingshots would not be efficient in delivering a clean, lethal shot and would result in the crippling and injuring of many species of wildlife. The department is also concerned about several issues surrounding the enforcement of this law should it pass, such as would a youth that is outdoors with a slingshot in his or her possession always need to have a small game hunting license and a qualifying accompanying adult with them? How could we enforce the use of a slingshot from a motorized vehicle, an ATV, snowmobile? Similarly, hunters would have to step off of any paved road, 10 feet off of a paved road. So there are a whole number of other enforcement issues that come along with this that we feel would be a challenge to enforce.
Would this require a hunter safety course if it passed?
Well, it would for anyone over the age of 16 and for not for youth. So.
Further questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
That was Judy Camuso, Wildlife Director at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, testifying for the department in opposition to a bill from Senator Andre Cushing that would legalize hunting with a slingshot. More testimony in opposition followed, but you get the idea, and we can drop it right there. Was it a frivolous bill? Was it a waste of time? Perhaps, but I would argue no. The senator did his job by bringing forward an idea from one of his constituents. The legislature represents the people of Maine, and this is how they bring their suggestions forward. Altogether, the hearing lasted about 20 minutes, and I suspect the work session will only last a couple. Up next, a bill to require the department to study whether winter ticks are killing off our moose. This is Bob Duchense's Wild Maine on Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. This is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket with Bob Duchense's Wild Maine. Today's show is taking you inside the State House for some proposed legislation on wildlife issues, both because the bill titles raise some eyebrows, but also just to get a look at how the legislative process actually works. These hearings happened on February 24th. This one is fascinating for a number of reasons. First, moose mortality was very high last winter due to winter ticks. Second, the guy introducing this bill used to be the commissioner of the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife.
Good afternoon, Representative Shaw and members of the Committee on Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. My name is Danny Martin, and I represent House District 150, located in the St. John Valley up in northern Aroostook County. It is my pleasure to appear before you as the sponsor of LD 134, a resolve to study the impact on winter ticks on the state's moose population. This resolve is straightforward and simply directs the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to conduct a study of the impact of winter ticks on the state's moose population, including, and that's very important, including identifying any problems for the moose population created by ticks and recommending possible courses of action, if any, to address this issue, to include potential legislation. The harvesting of moose, as you well know, is big business, not only in northern Maine, but throughout the entire state of Maine, with a considerable economic impact to the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, to our Maine guides, and clearly to the sporting industry. We know that winter ticks are a real concern in New Hampshire, and I know you've all read about their situation south of us. Because of this issue, New Hampshire, as you well know, has reduced its moose population allocation from a high of 675 permits to a low of 124. It's my understanding that this year their commissioner and their committee will recommend 124 permits for, actually it was for 2014. You all know that the moose population in New Hampshire has decreased just in 4 or 5 years from a little over 7,500 to approximately 4,000. Maine, on the other hand, as you well know, issued just a couple years ago a little over 4,100 permits, and in 2014, just last year, reduced their allocation to 3,095 permits. And it's my understanding that in 2015, this coming year, the commissioner is recommending a little over 2,800 permits. So there's a decrease there. The concern that I have is I recall back in 2003 when I was employed by the department, and one of the very first questions that I asked our head wildlife biologist was, you know, Mr. Rillo, how many moose do we have in the state of Maine? Because that's the first thing that folks like Mr. Smith, George Smith, and others would ask me, and I simply didn't know. Their response back in 2003 was 30,000 moose, and that was fine until I went to a public hearing, which I was chairing in the Old Town area, and one of the regional biologists there, just a couple years after that, indicated for the record and publicly that the moose population was 50 or 60,000. Well, you might safely assume that the following morning we had a very interesting discussion with our wildlife biologist in regard to that. And simply, we just didn't know how many moose we had. The department clearly is to be commended for the study they're currently conducting. As you know, the department is conducting, I think, a 4 or 5 year study, and they're to be commended for that. However, more needs to be done in regards to the winter tick issue. That concludes my presentation. I want to thank you for your consideration, and I'd attempt to answer any questions that you all might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative. Any questions? Yes, Senator Seaway.
How many do we have for moose?
I believe you'd have to ask that to those that I think will be following me, either testifying for this bill or in opposition, but I think it's projected to be 60 or 70,000 in that area.
That's Representative Danny Martin of Sinclair, introducing a bill to require the Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to study moose and winter ticks. We'll skip the questions from the committee and go right to the next voice testifying, which shouldn't come as a surprise. My old friend George Smith used to be the executive director of the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. He's now a private citizen, but he still has a lot of opinions.
When I proposed in 2012 to gradually increase the moose harvest to 10%, the percentage of deer we harvested last year, the department's moose biologist, Lee Cantor, convinced this committee to oppose the bill because, in Lee's words, the big unknown is mortality and the causes of mortality. So we have to be cautious in the number of permits we issue. Given that the department made $1,753,660 on last year's moose lottery, it's inexcusable that we are not doing the research to answer Lee's concerns and questions. And because we're not doing that, we're leaving millions of dollars in the woods in the carcasses of moose killed by ticks. This cripples our Northwoods hunting industry and disappoints tens of thousands of hunters. In fact, many have given up on the lottery, discouraged that they would never get a chance to hunt Maine moose. Please consider these facts. 65% of moose hunters were successful in 2014, and almost 100% of non-resident moose hunters got a moose. Those success rates are unheard of for big game animals. For example, in Maine in 2012, hunters harvested 10.7% of our deer, 10.4% of our bears, and just 3.9% of our moose. Density of moose is obviously a factor in mortality from ticks, but we cut moose permits by almost 1,000 last year because the initial data showed significant mortality from ticks. Wouldn't it be better to approach this like we do the budworm? Reduce the density of our most valuable product, moose, before the ticks kill them and capture their value. Perhaps you don't believe the moose population is high. If not, please talk to some of Maine's largest landowners who have suffered significant damage from over-browsing by moose. And it isn't just ticks that are an issue. We know that bears kill a lot of moose calves, but we've chosen not to research or address that problem. We don't intend to even try to find out. So here are a few recommendations. Let's allocate at least half of the money raised by the moose lottery to moose management and research. My preference would be to allocate all of it. Moose are so important to our hunting heritage and our economy. We must maximize hunting opportunity. Given that we recently learned that the department has a $3 million surplus, it's unacceptable to fall short of the research we need about the health and population of our moose. Second, partner with the hunting industry, sporting camps, lodges, and guides to make sure we are maximizing revenue from non-resident hunters. The 97% success rate of non-resident moose hunters is pretty amazing, but many spend minimal dollars here in our state to get their moose. Other states do much more than we do to help and sustain their hunting industry. Third, work with large landowners who are concerned about over-browsing of their woodlands by moose to reduce moose populations and damage in those areas. This is a serious issue to several large landowners. Fourth, simplify the lottery. It's gotten far too complicated. And finally, aim for a harvest of 10% of our moose each year. That is conservative and only half of a sustainable harvest rate. It would put moose in the same harvest category as other big game animals, including deer.
That's George Smith testifying on a bill in front of the legislature's IF&W committee to require the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife to study moose and winter ticks. We'll take a break while I check my notes. If I understand the testimony correctly, one way to solve the problem of too many moose dying is to kill more of them. When we come back, we'll see what the department says about that. This is Bob Duchense's Wild Maine, and the radio station is Sports Radio 92.9 The Ticket. Welcome back to Bob Duchense's Wild Maine. Today we're digging into how hunting and wildlife laws are made, grabbing some actual testimony on actual bills. We're now up to LD 134, which would make the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife study winter ticks and their mortality effect on moose. There were several people who testified in support of the bill, and there was only one opponent. But that opponent was the department itself. Judy Camuso is Wildlife Director.
As you know, LD 134 is a resolve asking the department to study and report its findings on the winter tick impact to Maine's moose population. The department has been and is currently studying the impacts of winter tick on moose in Maine, and we report those findings to the legislature annually. So I'd like to take a minute and explain a little bit about winter ticks and what the department is currently doing for research in this area. So winter ticks are a little bit different. And here in Maine we have about 17 species of ticks. Winter ticks are a one-host tick that spends its entire life stage on a single host. It's very different than most other ticks. In the winter with a heavy tick infestation, an animal can host tens of thousands of these ticks, which can have a significant impact on the body condition and overall health of that animal. Moose mortality, other than legal kill, has been examined by IF&W staff since at least the 1960s, and over time, biological data collection has been refined to provide a better assessment of mortality factors. Since 1992, IF&W staff reported occurrences of winter tick, either tick loads, hair loss, on moose found dead or otherwise handled. In 2005, IF&W developed a protocol to count winter ticks on hunter-harvested moose at check stations. This protocol established an index to the relative abundance of winter tick on moose annually. To date, we have examined over 1,100 harvested moose for ticks. We are currently collaborating with New Hampshire to understand winter tick dynamics and effects on moose, so that we can better develop a predictive model for severe tick years and how they will impact annual mortality. In 2014, working collaboratively with the University of New Hampshire, New Hampshire Fish and Game, and the Maine Animal Health Lab, we initiated an adult cow and calf survival project to quantify annual losses. Part of this work includes assessing and identifying moose mortality factors that occur outside of the legal harvest. This assessment is in addition to IF&W's normal assessment of the annual legal moose harvest. Since winter tick numbers rise and fall, it is critical to measure and assess moose mortality over time. So we're doing this project for a minimum of 5 years to look at annual changes. Various factors such as the length of winter, snow depth, temperature, wind speeds, moose densities, and alternate host all play a role in determining the severity of winter tick infestation. IF&W continues to evaluate incorporating a second study area to quantify differences across the geographical range of moose within the state of Maine. Through the survival study, we are examining a number of physiological parameters to assess moose health, establish normal values for moose in the Northeast, and determine additional mortality factors such as internal and external parasites, bacterial and viral pathogens. While winter tick appears to be a significant factor in moose mortality, there are other associated internal parasites, including roundworm, tapeworm, lungworm, brainworm, that affect moose and may have ramifications for survival.
Hold on, let me get this straight. The department has been studying moose, it has been studying ticks, it has been collaborating with New Hampshire to figure out what's going wrong, and last year began a very aggressive radio collaring program to see what's happening to mamas and babies. And it's not enough just to study ticks when it could be a combination of other parasites and weather changes that are contributing to the problem. Well, if the argument is that we have too many ticks because we have too many moose, then in areas where we don't have as many moose, we shouldn't have the tick problem. I wonder if that will come up.
There's one school of thought where, if you have a lot of animals in a smaller area, they're more likely to share parasites. But if we look at animals in lower density parts of the state where there aren't as many moose, you would then expect to see fewer ticks, and that's not in fact the case. So there's lots of other variables that affect tick survival, tick mobility, and most of those are environmental factors that are separate from moose density. So certainly that's one of the things we're looking at, but that's not really this, we don't know that that's actually the answer. And from the outside, the tick is the visible, the thing that people see, so it's easy to sort of latch onto that, but we need to understand fully what's going on with the entire system of the moose, so all the other internal parasites, all those things play into it. It's not just as simple as the ticks. We do know that last year we had a higher than usual mortality of both adult cows and calves last winter, which is why we cut the permits back.
Well, let me make this suggestion. Why don't we get our moose biologist, Lee Cantor, to meet with biologists from other states in Canada and put their heads together to take a closer look at the tick problem?
So Lee is, of course, as our moose biologist, is a part of an entire group of moose regionally biologists get together annually once or twice a year. And that's with the Canadian provinces, all the biologists in the Northeast get together and talk about moose issues. There's also an annual moose conference. That's a sort of North American moose biologists get together. So we've been working with the New Hampshire Fish and Game, Vermont Fish and Game for many, many years. In 2014, we undertook a very specific 5-year study in conjunction with New Hampshire Fish and Game, and we actually brought in an aerial capture crew that came in and they're radio collaring the moose. And so New Hampshire and Maine are sort of doing this project together, and so that's the 2014 reference is just to that one specific study that we are undertaking. We measure a whole host of indices when we capture the moose, when we handle it. We take blood, we take fecal samples, we take hair samples, we look for parasites, internal parasites, external parasites. So we measure a whole host of parameters, which is really essential to understanding what may be causing non-lethal mortality of moose. So it's never just one thing with the wildlife or with any mammal. It's always a collection of things. So this study is looking at a whole host of parameters, and we're still establishing, what are the normals for a moose in the Northeast. And so it's a minimum of a 5-year study. We are anticipating that next year, we're looking to undertake a second study area up in probably Worcester County somewhere. So in addition to the survival study, we do several other aerial surveys to monitor moose population and to assess. We look at both. So we do two sort of separate studies. One looks at the composition of the animals on the landscape. So how many males for every 100 animals that you see? So what's the ratio between males and females on the landscape? How many of those males are adult bulls? How many of them are younger bulls? So we do that. Then we also just do transect, so we're getting an estimate of population. So we do a number of different studies on moose, but those aren't specific to ticks. Those are more population level studies that we do in addition to all the data we collect during the harvest season. And the other component to this study is so the animals that we're monitoring in this study have a radio collar on them, so we get a daily sort of location of each animal, and we monitor those animals. We monitor the females, and we monitor their birth rate and all that sort of information. So those animals that we captured and have a radio collar on, now we will monitor them for the rest of their lifespan.
Okay, but one thing not answered. Earlier, George Smith testified that we should be harvesting 10% of the moose population. Instead, we're only setting a goal of 3%. Who is to blame for that?
It's important for the public to understand that our moose goals are set by the public, so they're managed differently in different portions of the state. So some portions of the state are managed more for recreation and viewing. Other portions of the state are managed for hunting opportunities. And so those goals and objectives are actually set by the public, and it's our job as biologists to implement the public goals and objectives for that wildlife management district.
It is so inconvenient when I can't blame the government. It's even worse when there are no simple answers. But that's the way it goes under the copper dome of the State House. Nothing is ever simple. There are no easy answers, and some of the more unusual bills may actually have some merit, or at least it's somebody's chance to participate in their own democracy. On most days, that's considered a good thing. A lot of good ideas that end up in the legislature start out as bad ideas just waiting to get better. If you ever want to see how this works, you can listen to hearings online. Go to legislature.maine.gov and you can find your way there. You're also invited to testify. It's actually pretty easy, though often you got to wait a little while for your turn. Bob Duchense's Wild Maine is brought to you by Hammond Lumber, Dysarts, EBS, Doors Equipment, and Napa Auto Parts. We'll be back next Saturday at 9 a.m. and Sunday morning at 8 a.m., and we're always online afterwards at 929theticket.com. This is Sports Radio 929 The Ticket.